David Liederman, who is our speaker today, has been Chief Executive Officer of the Child Welfare League of America since 1984. This group is the oldest voluntary American organization which is concerned with developing and improving services to abused, neglected, and deprived children and their families. And CWLA, the Child Welfare League of America, has 850 voluntary and public agency members and a $10 million budget. Now, I wasn't aware of this organization, and so I asked that my friend, Janet Arenz, who is the chief exec of the Oregon Alliance of Children's Programs in Oregon, tell me the names of some of the groups in Oregon that belong to Mr. Liederman's organization. And they include the Perry Center, the Casey Family Programs, Boys and Girls Aid Society, Children's Trust, Rosemont School for Girls, the Scar Jasper Mountain, Albertina Kerr, Multnomah County Community and Family Services, Waverly Children's Center, Edgefield Children's Center, Morrison Center, Christie School, the Oregon Offices of Service to Children and Families, and Hold International. So an incredible umbrella organization that bridges both things in the private and the public sector. Now, this is not the only umbrella organization which Mr. Liederman has been associated with. He also helped form and now co-chairs Generations United, a 100 organization group devoted to promoting cross-generational cooperation. Now, although David Liederman was a youth activist in the 60s in Boston in the public housing projects, he did get well educated. And he has degrees from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst and master's degrees in education and social work from Springfield College and the University of Pittsburgh. He's been a 3-term Massachusetts legislature, and of special interest is the fact that he was Governor Michael Dukakis's chief of staff for 4 years while he was governor in Massachusetts. Always, however, and wherever he's been, he has served as an advocate for children and their families, and this has always been his primary focus. He's served as a national spokesperson for his organization. He's spoken widely, been on numerous public programs and television shows, and today, David Liederman kindly comes to speak to us on the subject, Putting Children First. Please join me in welcoming David Liederman.
Thank you, Fran. Congratulations. Fran was worried she might have to spend a little less time gardening, but I think she can handle it. Chris, congratulations to you. Job well done. Very happy to be here. This is a distinguished club and well known, and actually you guys are about 6 years older than the Child Welfare League. I think you're, what, 80 some years old, 81 and 82, and we're 77 years old. The Child Welfare League was founded in 1920. One of the recommendations of the first White House Conference on Children that was held during the Teddy Roosevelt administration. There's no one in this room that can remember that far back. But we're proud of the work of the League, and we're particularly proud of all of the groups that Fran mentioned, because the true heroes in your community are the people who are running the children's agencies in your community, and they are all of the agencies that Fran mentioned, and I won't mention them all again. But the executives of many of those agencies are here, and they are outstanding human beings and very dedicated and committed to improving the quality of life for kids in this country. So I am happy to be here on their behalf, and I particularly want to thank Janet for organizing all of this from the Alliance. Thank you. I come from Washington. It's good to get out of Washington. If you read the front page story in the Wall Street Journal on Wednesday, I don't know if you all saw this, many Americans view Washington as a mess and just tune it out. It's an interesting article, and I think it's, you know, it's true to a great extent, and it's troubling to me that it is true, and I'll tell you why. If you ask people who knows Trent Lott's the majority leader in the Senate of the United States, one of the 2 or 3 most powerful persons in the United States of America. 6 out of 10 people in the United States do not know who Trent Lott is. If you ask people who Tiger Woods is, he registers 91 on the Richter scale. 91% of the people in the United States know who Tiger Woods is. And there's a reason for it. And I think here is the problem. There is a disconnect going on between what's happening in Washington and what the true needs of people are and what the true concerns of people are in Portland, in Oregon, and all across the country. I want to tell you folks, it ain't balancing the budget. Now, there are some people who care about balancing the budget, but I would say that most of you do not go to bed at night worrying about the fact that the United States government is going to balance the budget. It is not about the capital gains tax reduction. While there might be some people in this room that would like a capital gains tax reduction, I would suggest to you that the vast majority of people in this country are not, that is not a compelling idea for the vast majority of people in this country. It is not about partial birth abortion. While there are some people who care very, very much about that issue on both sides, it is not a compelling issue for the vast majority of people. Campaign finance, while it's an issue for some people, it is not a compelling issue for large numbers of people in this country. Newsweek magazine did a poll just about a month ago. They ran a story on, I don't know if you've been reading all of this, about the brain and the development of the brain and the 0 to 3-year-old and all of that, which is terrific stuff. And they polled folks in this country who have small children. And they said to them, what matters most? What matters most to all of you folks that have small children? And here's what they got back. 54% were concerned that their child would be kidnapped or a victim of a violent crime. 52% were concerned that they would not be able to afford their child's college education. 51% were concerned that their child would have a serious illness or an accident. 41% were concerned that their child might be a victim of sexual abuse. 35% were concerned that they wouldn't be able to afford good health care. And 22% were concerned that they wouldn't be able to find affordable quality daycare. So those were the issues that parents of children said they were concerned about. There is a disconnect going on in the United States. Our friends in the Congress and the person who occupies the White House have one agenda. The people in the United States of America have another agenda. And there is a huge gulf between those two agendas. And as I indicated, there are some people in this room, some people in this country that share some of the agenda items that are currently under debate in Washington, D.C. Now, we have an enormously difficult situation facing particularly poor children and vulnerable children in the United States of America. There are 22% of the children in the United States live below the poverty line. We have the highest child poverty rate of every country in the industrialized world. Here is the child poverty rate in 18 countries, all the countries in the industrialized world. Here is the United States at 21.5%. The next closest is Australia, that has a 14% poverty rate. United Kingdom is under 10%. Italy 9.6, West Germany 6.8, and on down. What is going on here? Why should the wealthiest country in the world have the highest child poverty rate of any of the industrialized countries in the world? Why should the wealthiest country in the world have 3.1 million reports of child abuse and neglect during the calendar year? Why should that be? Why should we have 500,000 kids in foster care in the United States? We have 500,000 children, youth, living in foster care, not living with their own families because they can't live with their own families for a whole variety of reasons. Why should we, in the wealthiest country in the world, have 1,300 child deaths that we know about as a result of abuse and neglect in this country? We have serious problems affecting the most vulnerable kids in the United States of America, and I would suggest to you that we're not going in the right direction. If anything, we're going 180 degrees in the wrong direction in the opposite direction, and it should be of huge concern to everyone in this room, because it's certainly of huge concern to all of us, the Child Welfare League, all of your colleagues who are sitting here who run child welfare agencies in this community. I would say to you that there are three major factors going on that are affecting the quality of life for children and families in the United States of America, particularly for poor kids in this country, and they are. The first is that there's a general trend toward less government. You've heard of devolution. Well, devolution is alive and well. There's some notion that we can depend more, on the voluntary sector, on charity, that somehow that the voluntary sector, that churches, that charity can pick up the slack, and that government can spend less money and we can still take care of kids. And I would say to you that that is absolute sheer poppycock. It is folly. It is nonsense. Should we give up volunteers? No way. We have 200,000 volunteers working in our network of child welfare agencies. They do phenomenal things for us every single day. But they themselves would say they can't provide health care to kids who need health care. They can't lift kids out of poverty. They don't have the skills to work with abused and neglected kids and do the kinds of things that are necessary to give them a decent shot at life. Who are we kidding? This is not about shifting to volunteers, shifting to the churches. My friend Fred Campbell, who runs Catholic Charities of America, says, stop, spare us. We got more volunteers. Our volunteers numbers are growing all the time. We can't keep up with feeding homeless people, with taking care of immigrant children. We can't keep up with it. We can't keep up. So this notion of devolution, this notion of getting government out of the mix is folly. And what troubles us is that the beating up on government, and the reason why the Wall Street Journal ran that article that I referred to, is because a lot of politicians, local, state, and national politicians, make a living out of beating up on government. Beating up on government is good sport in the United States. It shouldn't be, folks. Government is critical for the needs of kids. Now, it might not be critical for Steve Forbes. Government might not be critical for Steve Forbes, because as you all know, Steve Forbes earned his money the old-fashioned way. He inherited it. So for Steve Forbes, he doesn't need government. But for poor kids, poor children, poor families, working class children, working class families, middle class children, middle class families, they need government in their lives. And they need it big time. And we need quality government, and we need government that works. We need government that works. The reason why the United States has the largest child poverty rate in the United States is very simple. If you look at all of the other countries that have lower, most of them single-digit child poverty rates, you find they have government-sponsored safety nets. They all do. They have children's allowances. They have family allowances. They have guaranteed health care. They have affordable child care. They have paid parental leave. They have generous unemployment benefits. They have subsidized housing. Now, I don't want to stand here and make it sound like all of these countries are wonderful and they're all perfect, because they're not by any stretch of the imagination. And as we know, each of the countries in the industrialized world have their problems. But the fact is they have a history of taking care of kids and families. There is a commitment, and it's a commitment of all of the parties. It's not just the liberals, it's the liberals and the conservatives. It's a commitment of all the parties to take care of kids and families, and that government should have that role. So those who promote the notion that somehow volunteers can do this, I had the occasion to debate, I don't know if you know a woman named Arianna Huffington, but Arianna Huffington and I went at it one night on Crossfire on this subject, and I said to Arianna, Arianna, you are part of the problem, okay? Because when you take this position that you don't need government and somehow we can replace government with volunteerism and with the role of churches and synagogues and others, it is a huge distraction. It is a huge distraction. It takes away from what we really need to do in this country if we're serious about taking care of kids and families. The second factor that I think is huge and something that all of us in this room should be concerned about is what the impact of managed care is going to be on children and families in this country. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say I'm for it or I'm against it, because I don't think it's a question of being for or against, because managed care is basically a mechanism to deliver the services. The question is, what's the motivation? If it's implemented for the right reasons, if it's about improving the quality of services, if it's about getting better outcomes, if it's about improving case management and improving case advocacy, and if it's about making sure that kids and families get health care services, mental health services, substance abuse services, child welfare services, whatever the services are that they need, and they get it in the appropriate amount, and they get it and it does some good, and we all feel good about those services, then I would say it's not a bad idea. But if it's about saving money, and if the driving force for managed care is to save money, then I'm going to tell you we are in deep trouble. We are in deep trouble. And what we're going to see in this state and what we're going to see around the country is a total breakdown of the healthcare system, the mental health system, and any system that managed care touches, if that's the motivation. If the motivation is bring in for-profits, turn it over, somehow hope that by some miracle they will save us money and they will take care of the folks, so to speak, then we got another thing coming. And I must tell you that if I were the politician, if I were the governor, if I were the mayor, I would be very, very hesitant about turning over anything to for-profits. And I don't want to speak against the appropriate role of for-profits, but I think if I were the governor and I had a deal with a for-profit to provide, say, child welfare services, how do I stand up before the people of Oregon and explain the next time there's a child death, explain that I have a for-profit making money on the backs of abused and neglected kids, or how do I do it on a welfare program like they want to do in Texas, and how do I stand up and say that I've got a for-profit making money on the backs of poor people? I think that gets a little tricky. I think it gets a little tricky. I think for-profits have a role. They certainly can do great things in the administrative side, on the management information system side, but I think we need to figure out what the balance is. But clearly, the whole notion of shifting the way we provide critical services to children and families and shifting to a managed care, we better be very careful. We better be very careful, because these are all very important services that people need. And what it speaks to is the whole issue of standards. It speaks to the whole issue of accreditation. It speaks to the whole issue of how do we guarantee quality services when we start shifting the way we normally provide services, particularly to vulnerable populations. Third factor is the impact of welfare reform on the most vulnerable children and families among us. The elimination of the entitlement, which was in existence for 60 years by a combination of the Congress and the President, I think in handing the entire system over to the states, I believe, in my opinion, people will argue, you'll have your chance, in my opinion, does not bode well for our kids and our families. I think it was a terrible mistake. I think we're going to pay huge price for doing it. I spent 10 years in state government in Massachusetts. I will remind you, Massachusetts was the only state that voted for George McGovern. Okay, so Massachusetts is not viewed as a conservative state. It's viewed as a liberal state. And I will tell you that every year in my 10 years, there were efforts in the state legislature to cut the benefits for poor people. Putting a total responsibility for caring for the most vulnerable among us in the hands of the governors and state legislatures, and I speak as a former legislator, and as you heard, a former chief of staff to a governor, is like putting the fox in the chicken coop. The states do not have a history, they have no history of a willingness to take care of this population. And it is only because the federal government has had federal mandates and the federal government has had federal guarantees that the states stepped up to the plate and did what they needed to do. So what we will see is what I call a race to the bottom. You will see states competing with each other to see who can reduce the benefits so that the state next door will not have higher benefits than they do. I mean, this does not bode well for poor children and poor families. And the interesting thing that's happening in the United States, and just picture this for a second and then tell me what's going to happen when this shifts. I don't know if you saw the report this morning. Unemployment's 4.8%. Okay, we probably have the strongest economy we've had in, what, 2-3 decades. I mean, it's huge. It's a roaring economy, hugely strong. It's a rare circumstance in the United States of America that every single state in the United States has a surplus. Every single state in the United States has a surplus. There was a headline in the USA Today about 2 weeks ago. States have billions in budget surpluses. Minnesota, 2.3 billion. Indiana, 1.8 billion. Michigan, 1.1 billion. New York, 2 billion. There's a total of $20 billion surplus for the states combined. The states are rolling in loot. They are rolling in loot. And what are they doing? Half the states are cutting the welfare benefit for poor children and poor families. Not one state in the United States of America is increasing the benefit for poor children and poor families. What are they going to do when the going gets tough? What are they going to do when the next recession hits and when unemployment goes up to double digits? What are they going to do then when they have deficits like I witnessed when I was in state government in the 70s? And we had to pass 2 tax programs one year because of the deficits that we had in the state of Massachusetts. We're going to be in deep trouble. And what is that going to mean for poor kids and poor families? It does not bode well. If we can't be generous with poor children and poor families when we're rolling in loot, what are we going to do when we don't have the money? The governors are going to step up to the plate? You've got to be kidding. Tommy Thompson from Wisconsin is going to come to the rescue? Sure. Don't hold your breath. Do not hold your breath. Who are these moms that are demonized in this country? Who are they? Who are these moms that everybody beats up on? You know, all these young moms on welfare that everybody beats up on, right? I mean, I'm not making this up. Who are they? Let me tell you who they are. First-time welfare recipients. This is a profile of first-time welfare recipients. 47% have less than 11 years of education. Less than 11 years of education. 40% have had no work experience. 0 work experience. 53% are under 24 years old. 55.6% are white. 28.4% of African American. 16% are Latino, which is totally contrary to what people perceive to be, that it's minorities who are getting public assistance. 55.6% are white. 58% have never married. 69% have children under 3. That's a profile of the first time, of people who come on welfare for the first time. And just so you'll feel good, the total cost to the federal government in 1996 for the former AFDC program, because you know it doesn't exist anymore, the total cost to the federal government was 1.1% of the federal budget. 1.1%. $17 billion, which just happens to roughly equal $17 billion, roughly equals the net worth of Bill Gates. So one person in the United States of America had a net worth in 1996 that equaled what the federal government spent to take care of 13 million children and poor moms. And this is the group of people that we beat up on and demonize. So what's the deal? What's the deal? Here's the deal. We have an undereducated, young, unmarried moms with little or no job experience, with 1 or 2 children under the age of 3, and we are now, by some miracle, going to accomplish what no one else has been able to accomplish up until now, which is to get a large percentage of them into the workforce. Now, if you believe that, you believe in the tooth fairy. If you think that's going to happen, you believe in the tooth fairy. Half of the jobs that these folks are going to get are going to be minimum wage jobs. Minimum wage jobs with no benefits, no sick days, no vacation days, no personal days, no health insurance. I have single moms working for me at the Child Welfare League, many, with 1, 2, 3 kids. I want to tell you folks, every week it's something else. Every week it's something else. It's an ear infection. Got to take the kids to the clinic. Babysitter broke down. Daycare didn't work. I mean, every day it's something. Parenting is difficult. This is not easy. We happen to be a family-friendly place. We happen to be a place that has generous benefits. And we have sick days, we have personal days, we have vacations, we pay people a decent wage. How are folks going to manage with 1, 2, or 3 children on minimum wage jobs with no benefits? Who's kidding who? How are we going to do it? I don't get it. And what we're going to have here is we're going to have people who are currently called working moms competing with people who are currently on welfare for the same jobs and for the same daycare slots, because there's only a limited number, and they're going to be competing with one another. I had the occasion during the Republican National Convention I was commenting on, I think it was CNBC, and Susan Molinari, I don't know if you know who she is, she's now going to be a radio TV host, former congresswoman from Staten Island, current congresswoman, soon to be a TV personality. Susan was giving her, her keynote address to the Republican conference. They had to get at least one woman up there, so they identified Susan, and they were able to move her up to the stage. She gave her address, and her address, in her address, she talked about how difficult she and her husband, who's also a congressman, a guy named Bill Paxton, just had a baby. And they actually had the baby at the conference, which was nice. And she talked about how difficult it was to be a working mom. And I commented, it is exceedingly difficult to be a working mom. And here is a congresswoman who, she and her husband had a combined income of $300,000. They have the best health care benefits of anyone in the United States, because members of Congress, you know, have the best health care benefits. They have a daycare center sitting at their beck and call on Capitol Hill anytime. They have 2 wonderful, supportive families, grandparents, aunts, uncles, all kinds of wonderful people to take care of this kid. And she talked about how difficult it was to be a working mom. And she just voted for a bill that's going to push young, poor women that I just described to you into the workforce willy-nilly. You've got to be kidding. We have degraded parenting. We have forgotten all about child development. We were at the athletic club this morning for a meeting of our members, and on the way out, I was standing there. Eileen Pastor, who's our Western Office Director, was over in the garage getting the car, and I was standing there watching the moms coming in with the kids. You know, the moms were going to play tennis, they were going to swim, they had little kids, the kids all looked healthy, they looked happy. I mean, the kids were being kids, and the moms were being moms. Come on, have we forgotten about this? We're talking about 0 to 3 and the development of the brain. We're talking about the importance of parenting during those first 3 critical years, and how important that bond is between the child and the parent. We know all that. What is wrong with us? What is this push? Why shouldn't we be helping young moms to work part-time? Why shouldn't we be helping young moms to get further education? In California, you can't be on welfare now and go to a community college. They will not allow you to do it. You can't. They won't allow it. This is dumb. This is dumb. What are we doing in this country? We have forgotten about our values. We have forgotten who we are and what we should be caring about. So, what's going on? Here's what's going on. This is not about reform. None of this is about reform. This is all about politics. This is all about politics. And there shouldn't be anyone in this room that confuses the two, because it's got nothing to do with reform. It's about politics. Politicians have figured out that the key to success in getting elected and re-elected, in Oregon you won't have to worry about that because of your term limits, but in many places they do, and the key to getting elected and re-elected is you beat up on people on welfare and you call for tax cuts for the middle class. That is the key to success. Tax cuts for the middle class, take the money from the poor, give it to the middle class. I always say this country amazes me. This is the only country where we believe we need to subsidize the rich by giving them more money, and we need to take money away from the poor to make them stronger. Think about that. Am I making that up? We're going to spend, if this budget agreement goes through, we're going to spend $250 billion on tax cuts for the wealthiest people in this country because they need help. They need help. And at the same time, we're going to blister poor people. Something is wrong with that picture. In New York State, they have a $2 billion surplus. $2 billion. The governor of New York, Mr. Pataki, is proposing to cut the benefit for a mom and 2 kids. They get $577 a month. Can you imagine living in New York on $577 a month? He's proposing to cut the benefit to $317 a month. This is in New York. It's supposed to be the Rockefeller state, you know, the Mario Cuomo state, the liberal bastion in the United States. We have lost our way. And one of the things that's going to happen is, one of the results of all of this is we are going to double the foster care population in the next 5 years. Because where are these kids going to go? If the mom has neither a job nor assistance, where are the kids coming? They're going to come to us. They're coming into the foster care system. And we could see our population double in the next 5 years. And that has huge implications for all of our agencies, for your public agencies and for your not-for-profit agencies that are serving this population. And there are a couple of things that we're trying to do, and I will just mention them quickly and then close, so we have a few minutes for questions. One is, we are working with a bipartisan group in the Senate led by Senator Chafee, Republican from Rhode Island, Senator Rockefeller, Democrat from West Virginia, a bipartisan group of 13 Republican and Democratic senators to try to pass the SAFE Act, which is a bill that would ensure permanence and safety for children in the child welfare system. And the wonderful thing that Senator Chafee and Rockefeller understand is you can't do this on the cheap. And there's $1 billion a year in there that would go to our agencies to help us to try to move kids into adoption, to try to make sure that kids are safe, to try to make sure that we have a foster care system that works. And we need your help. I would love for all of you to send a note to Senator Smith, to send a note to Senator, sounds like Wyden, Ron Wyden, and to ask them both to become co-sponsors of S511, which is the number of the bill and the act that I think is critical that we get passed. One of the things that concerns us, and this is Washington politics, is that the House passed a similar bill that does a lot of the same things. There's only one huge difference between the House and the Senate bill. The House bill has no money. The Senate bill has money. Minor difference, right? And now it seems that the leadership in the Senate wants to pull a little maneuver by substituting the House bill for their own bill and doing what I call taking care of kids on the cheap, or looking like you're taking care of kids, but you're really not. So a little note to Senator Smith and Senator Wyden would be welcome. Second thing is that we're working with the Casey program. Fran mentioned the Casey Family Program, and I think Mike Matern is here. And Casey, as you know, is in many states, not just Oregon, and they have a wonderful film called Take This Heart. And it's a terrific film that's going to be shown on public broadcasting here in Oregon, and that's going to be shown on public broadcasting across the country. And basically, it's a wonderful look at foster care and a wonderful look about how everyone can help to improve the foster care system in this country. Because those of us who work in child welfare get very upset when we hear people beating up on foster care all the time. You know, foster parents are the salt of the earth. I don't know if there are any foster parents in this room, but foster parents do phenomenal work. You know, are there some bad apples? Of course, there's bad apples in everything. But the fact is that the vast majority of people who are foster parents are unbelievable folks who step up to the plate and do wonderful things for kids. And we need to support them, and I think you will enjoy seeing this film, and we think it's a terrific effort. And the third thing that we're working on is something we call Protecting America's Children. It's everyone's business. It should be the entire community of Portland's responsibility to protect the most vulnerable kids in this town. It shouldn't just be the social worker's responsibility. It shouldn't just be the police responsibility. It should be everyone's responsibility. Civic groups like the City Club, the churches, the synagogues, the business community, all need to get into this mix. And we need to do a better job of being strategic in terms of how we work with abused and neglected kids. You know, we did a study in Sacramento about the relationship between child welfare and juvenile justice, and the relationship between the kids in child welfare and juvenile justice. It's a huge relationship. I'll just give it to you very quickly. We looked at every 9 to 12-year-old kid in Sacramento. 1% of the 9 to 12-year-olds in Sacramento were in the juvenile justice system, about 1,200 kids. 50% of the 1% were known to the child welfare system. 50% of the 1% of the kids were known to the child welfare system. We need to be more strategic in the way we work with this population, and that's something we're trying out in several jurisdictions in the United States. So let me close by saying to you that I am honored to have had a chance to speak to you. I think you're all a very, I'm sure everyone in this room is learned and reads the papers and keeps up on stuff, which is great. You are the leaders in this community. You are the leaders in Oregon. And it's up to you to show the way. It is time, I think, folks, to bring a little compassion back on the scene. I'm frankly sick of macho. I'm sick of all these macho politicians. I'm sick of all this macho stuff. You know, get tough, you know. I mean, I think it's time to bring a little compassion back to the table. It wouldn't hurt. And I think it's all of our responsibility to try to do that. And, you know, I'll just leave you with the one thought that if everyone in this room makes a difference in the life of one child, we will all sleep very good tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Liederman. You're obviously committed to your cause, and you have the facts to back it up. You've given us some suggestions as to things we might do to make a difference. Your point is well taken that the federal government should be doing more to help kids, to help the underprivileged. It may be that most of us aren't laying awake at night thinking about the balanced budget, but the fact is we and you need to live with that. Yes. And I'm wondering what you and your organizations have done or are doing to live with the fact that you're likely to get less money from the government in the future.
Don, it's an excellent question, and it's something we're struggling with all the time. And Peter, we're struggling with it all the time. And I think one of the things that's happening in our world is that there are mergers going on, there's a lot of networking going on, agencies are looking at ways that they can work with one another, that they can share resources, become more efficient in the way they run their business. I think a lot of that is happening, and I think it probably needs to happen. I think it'll be healthy for all of us. It's a little scary. It's a little scary because change is scary, and I think it, you know, and I think if you're the executive, I see our executives sitting out there, and you've got a $10 million budget, and you've got a couple hundred people on the payroll. You got to know where your money is at the end of the year. You know, I mean, it's a lot to worry about. And I'm looking at Chris Crank, and I'm looking at Mike Balta sitting there, and I'm sure they're saying amen. You know, because this is not easy. But I think that, my feeling is, and this is the part that I struggle with, while I think we need to make efficiencies, I am sick and tired of seeing the way we waste money in this country and the way we throw money away on all kinds of things that I think are totally irrelevant. And we don't direct the money at the most important thing in this country, which are our kids, our families, and try to help our kids and families to have a shot at a decent life. I just don't get it. And if we have money to do tax cuts, is there any wealthy person in this room or any wealthy person in this country who can honestly, with a straight face, look at me in the eye with a straight face and tell me they can't afford to pay more taxes? I don't believe it. I can afford to pay more taxes. I will pay more taxes. And I think that politicians do us a huge disservice by playing this game of trying to pamper to, trying to pander to, the middle class, the upper middle class, the wealthy in this country. It's sickening the way politicians do that. I mean, I didn't do it when I was a politician. I got reelected twice, okay? I mean, the question is, are you willing to be honest and engage your constituents about the realities of life in America? And I think we have the money to do what we need to do in this country. It really is a question of priorities, and it's a question of tax fairness. And I think we've been moving in the wrong direction. Chris, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Chris Crank, City Club member and director of Albertina Kerr Centers here in Portland. My question, David, is that, actually a comment and question, but in Oregon and around the country, there's been a strong trend towards locking children up who are young as 12, 13, 14. Do you see this trend continuing? And if so, why?
Boy, Chris, you were right on the money. One of the bills, again, I feel so much that we are so out of step, and there's such a disconnect. We have both the president and the Congress and the leadership in the Congress supporting the most punitive legislation affecting young children in this country who are in the JJ system. It pains me to see what these guys want to do. They just want to lock kids up. They want to build more prisons. They want to build juvenile jails. They want to treat kids as adults when they're 14 in court. Now, some kids do some terrible things. I was a gang worker in Boston for 4 years. I mean, I know that some kids do some terrible things, but they're kids, for God's sake. Are we just going to write them off? I mean, and we know how to work with a lot of these kids. We really do. We know how to make a difference in the lives of a lot of these kids. But the trend is not just in Oregon, Chris. The trend is across the country. And there's this knee-jerk reaction that, I mean, I often say to people that so many adults in this country would like it a lot if all the 14 to 19-year-olds just disappeared. If they just went away somewhere, and got out of our lives, But the fact is that they're in our lives, and the fact is that we need to address it in a rational and reasonable way. And one of the things that we know, and I'm glad to see that you're working on that project, one of the things that we know is that we can pretty much identify who the kids are. And we can do that. And that's why we should be doing community policing. I mean, Boston has had this aggressive program of a combination of community policing and youth workers. They have an army of youth workers. And they have reduced juvenile crime. I think they've cut it in half. They've eliminated the gang activity. They have just turned the whole thing around by getting aggressive and going in the community and working where the kids are and not just trying to build some jails and lock people up. So I think it can be done. Yes?
I have a question. Dr. Edward Press, City Club member. I have a question relating to managed care for children,
yes.
Profit versus nonprofit. Before I ask the question, I'd like to make a 20-second comment, a sort of I told you so comment, particularly pertinent because of the election here. As a 30-year member of the City Club, I resigned in protest when they voted against letting female members in and I rejoined when they did allow female members in. And I just want to make a note the fact that we now have 2 outstanding, prominent female presidents. So my question is this. You're saying, in effect, that the for-profit managed care people are the villains and the non-profit are the...
No, I don't leave that impression.
Well, okay.
I think the for-profits have a role. I think we ought to define what that role is, and I think it needs to be carefully
Well, I'm not
defined.
plugging for-profits now.
Okay.
The point I want to make is this, that some of the non-profit, first place, I agree with you on managed care. Many of the managed care programs are managing to get as much profit as possible, regardless of the quality of care, you see. But what I want to say is that some of the non-profit, if you get on the inside of it, you find the salaries and the perks for some of the executives in the non-profits are pretty high, and so that they're not completely blameless. My question is this: if you have some ruler of making sure that the mental and physical quality of care that the children are getting comes to a certain standard, then you can apply it to both of them and raise the level. Do you have any suggestions? Now, you've been in this business a long time. Do you have any suggestions as to a method of measuring objectively the quality of care that you can apply to both of them? That would help.
Exactly what you just said, through the implementation of standards, through the development of protocols, and with teeth in it, where the states and the counties or whoever's administering the program really requires a certain level of care, and it's known to all parties, and both for-profits and not-for-profits have to measure up to the same standards. Without standards, we're in deep trouble. Without standards, we're in deep trouble.
Can you get that to be implemented from both voluntary and government agencies? Do you have any comments on that? How would you do that for both?
Well, we have an accreditation system within the Child Welfare League of America. There are 2 main accrediting bodies that accredit child welfare agencies. There's the Council on Accreditation for Service to Children and Families, and there's the Joint Commission on Healthcare Organizations, JCHO, which accredit different kinds of services within the child welfare community. Both of them are extremely well accepted in our world. Both of them require a level and a quality of services which I think we would all feel good about. And when I testified at the Ways and Means Committee about a month ago on the issue of child welfare, one of the things I talked about was the need for all child welfare agencies in this country to be accredited, because no one in this room would send their kid to a college that wasn't accredited. No one in this room would go to a hospital that wasn't accredited. But when it comes to serving our most vulnerable children and families, we don't have that as a requirement. And it should be a requirement for both the not-for-profits and the public agencies. And the public agencies. They should meet the accreditation just as the not-for-profits do. And that's a way of raising the level of quality for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray Polanyi, a City Club member. Mr. Liederman, I was intrigued by the statistics that you showed earlier about where the U.S. stands relative to other industrialized countries. And what came to mind was the recent election in France.
Yes.
And the result of that election. It's the first country that broke ranks with this idea of devolution, going instead in the other direction. Would you tell us where France stands on that statistic, please?
Yeah, well,
that might prove some point.
Yeah, I'll just tell you a little story that shows you where France stands. I had the occasion about 2 or 3 months ago to meet with the wife of the president of France, who was in the United States. She was in Washington. She asked to come meet with us at the Child Welfare League because child abuse is one of her areas of interest, and she wanted to understand some of the things that we were doing in the United States. Wonderful person. And we had a great chat for an hour, and in the course of discussion, we talked about the role of government. And I said to her, I said, why is it in this country people are beating up on government, and in France, people want the government? She says, because in France, the government takes care of people. And this is the wife of a conservative president, okay? So what happens is, look at, if you give people a tax credit, this $500 tax credit that they're talking about, it's a total waste of money. Just, it's not worth the paper it's written on. The vast majority of people who get it won't even know they got it. I mean, it's all figured into your taxes. Most people have accountants, I mean, or they fill out a short form. I mean, how are you going to know? You won't even know what you got. If you get, as they do in France, every child in France, poor, middle class, wealthy, every child in France gets $100 a month family allowance, children's allowance, a check from the government, children's allowance. In Germany, they get $200 a month, children's allowance. They get a check. They get a check. Now, if you get a check, you know you're getting something, right? And you're not going to want to give it up. You're not going to want to give it up because it becomes an important part of your financial management, of your own family resources. They get it, okay? And what the people of France said is, we want government in our lives. We want government in our lives. And I don't want to stand here and say that government should be ruling everything. No, no way. But government is a piece of the action in the United States, an extremely important piece of the action, and we've got to stop beating up on it because it's really necessary, particularly for the most vulnerable kids and families.
Very short. Erwin Mandel, City Club member. Statistics are funny things. When you say the United States has a 21.5% child poverty rate, the next highest is Australia at 14-some-odd%, and down the chart, are all of these countries using the same criterion measure for poverty?
No, you're absolutely right. They don't all use the same criteria. But I think there is a generally accepted conventional wisdom. I go to a lot of international meetings. I meet with a lot of people from various parts of the country. Actually, next week I'm going to be in Rome at an international meeting. And I will tell you that the Europeans do a better job than we do on the basic safety net. On the basic safety net. They do. They have a stronger history, a much longer history of putting money into children and families. I mean, one of the best things in France, for example, that the French love is their daycare program. You go to Denmark. Denmark's daycare program is staggering. I mean, they got daycares that are like going to Harvard, for God's sake. I mean, they have this extraordinary daycare program. I mean, one of the big discussions in Denmark is because the daycare is so great, they have discussions about that the parents need to spend more time with the kids. You know, I mean, that's what they're talking about, okay? So, I mean, they have, and again, they're not perfect by any stretch. You know, France has a huge unemployment rate. They got big problems. I mean, Germany's trying to reunify, and they've got all kinds of problems. I mean, these countries are not perfect, and they've got their economic problems, and they have their social problems. But there's a history there, and somehow in this country, we get stuck. We get stuck on individual responsibility. We get stuck on the appropriate role of government. We get stuck on all of these philosophical issues that plagues us and makes it very difficult for us to do the right thing for kids and families. So we got some work to do, right? But what the heck? It's a free country, and it's still the best country in the world, right? Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Liederman. Most of this week, my principal concern in my life has been my distress that I've been unable to get my spinach and beets to grow. And I can assure you that your remarks today have refocused where my concern should more appropriately be laid, and I think all of us feel the same way. I certainly applaud Chris Olson again for her distinguished service as City Club President, and thank all of the present and past board members and you as the members for the privilege of working with you in this really wonderful organization. And we do stand adjourned. Thank you.